Can I ask one more question on
Oh,
this?
you
I know
got the
it's a
whole time.
little different than some of what most of you have been talking about, but have you ever seen a document like what you've been talking about specifically for students to give students as a resource in terms of, because that's something we talk a lot about in my office is how do students hold other students accountable? How do they hold themselves accountable? Because right now our students will tell you that our students of color feel like they're the ones doing that second, third level teaching, which we all know we experience as well. But I would love to be able to give resources to students, and that feels like I just haven't seen it, and I can definitely work to create my own. But I was wondering if you even had like, I've the allyship video. There's good videos out there, but I'm trying to think a more tangible like sheet.
So a couple of the documents that I think you have access to, but I'll make sure. One is my suggested competencies for white allies. It's like 96. So again, I overdo sometimes. But you could look at that. If it's not in the packet, the way to get it is on my website. If you've downloaded my book, But I'm Not Racist, then the link that's related to that has all the resources. So if you can't find it, let me know. So that might be interesting, and you can generic that up for privileged groups in general. Yeah. Another document that you do have is panning, kind of panning with an inclusion lens. It's like 21, quote, tools that every leader. So that's document. And then the self-assessment for inclusion practitioners you have.
Right, modify that almost.
Yeah, so you could literally take those two, yourself and or you bring together some leaders, student leaders that you have a lot of respect for, and say, can we look at all this and maybe come up with 20 or 30 that we think are a good foundation that if we were to have leaders get trained how to notice group dynamics with an inclusion lens, notice who's interrupting who, be able to speak up if 3 people are taking up all the airtime and have skills. So at least when I think about what student leaders could be doing differently, it's panning the group dynamics, group level, and then engaging and speaking up. It's really the skills we teach in the foundational workshop. But so I think if you look at those, you might change some of the language, get out some of the jargon, and yet many of these young folks coming in, and I'm assuming you're traditional age college students.
Yes.
Have, as you talked a moment ago, people are coming in with the terms and language, but not the skills or the confidence or the competence to speak up effectively, in my opinion, instead of what I used to do.
In order to do that, they need to have reflected on it. And it's like they could tell you I'm white, but they don't actually know what that means. And that like, I'm white, I need to think about my whiteness and therefore both how I show up, but also how I notice my peers and maybe call them in or out to their awareness. And it's like it's also that building of the like, you can tell me how you identify, but do you know that that's actually who you are when you walk in a space? So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Well, and as you're talking, another angle, especially with folks that think they know it all, and that could be faculty, staff, some students.
Right.
And I haven't done this for a while, but early on, you could have them in small groups. What are all the traps and ineffective things that X do? So what are all and you could do this, and if you're looking on race, it could be race-alike groups. But what are all the things that whites do, things that folks with class privilege say? So it's kind of microaggression-ish, but it's
a different lens.
Sorry?
It's a different lens, though.
And it's like in our team meetings, so in our group meetings, what are the behaviors that are unproductive? Now, I have that whole list. That's a whole other place to look. Unproductive meeting behaviors. It's like that 2-pager. It's right around where microaggressions are. That works really well with students. It works great with staff and faculty.
We actually do something like that so I work in the Center for Leadership around what is a stereotypical leader, but then who do you respect as a leader? And they kind of compare the lack of overlap and then talking about like, how do we not fall trapped to that? So almost that same type of, instead of just saying like you based off of your identity, is like collectively when we're in these meetings, what about, I like that. And you said that's unproductive
meeting behaviors.
Okay.
it's all right kind of together with the microaggression stuff. And so at least how I'm responding to you right now is the daily dynamics that happen that students do. How can they increase their awareness? And then the question is, how does this impact people differently?
Mm-hmm.
So if I interrupt Jamie in a meeting, very different impact than if I interrupt a white 62-year-old lesbian. And so to get students to realize that a junior interrupting a first-year student has a different impact than a junior interrupting a senior, unless there's a race cut. So it's almost backing into it. What are the difficult moments? Now, you could also give them a bunch of case studies. Say, I talked to some student leaders last semester. It has to be kind of true. And these are 10 common scenarios that happen in student groups. And then they can analyze them. So by group membership, what was going on? What was the probable impact? What was the intent of the person, possibly, if we give them a benefit of the doubt? And if you were in the room, given your group memberships, what could you have done?
Mm-hmm.
So they could do some of that case study work and then do some live ones where, I used to do this, have 4 different roles. I'm sure you've done this work. I need 5 people to come be everybody's going to have a different role. And we'll even put our group memberships on our chest. And then we play it out. Mm-hmm. And then have people, what did you track? What did you pan? Same thing, impact. Mm-hmm. By group membership, what increased the impact? That's what's great about that handout, I think. Mm-hmm. Me and 2 white women around the same age, it still sucks if we do it. But me to Jamie, me to you, across age and maybe some other identities, has a much more, what's the word I want? Geometrical? I don't know. Quantifiable. It's big.
Yeah.
So have people get, sorry?
It's amplified.
Ooh, good word. And then you could come up with a draft of the skills, but I'd run it by students, what they want in a leader. Mm-hmm. That's not bad. Mm-hmm. For, as we are moving towards having president of the student government, mm-hmm. fraternity, sorority, presidents, vice presidents, what kind of leader skills do you want them to have? Mm-hmm. We made a quick list, but we wanted student input because we don't know. Yep. Maybe it's changed, and let them give you feedback. And then can you imagine if you had a list of 20 to 25 that got embedded into every interview mm-hmm. for student leadership, and they got them beforehand and speak to how like we're trying to do with staff and faculty and leaders, build that into the student selection processes.
Well, it makes me also think, even to build the one for staff and faculty here, it's worth going to students. What would a faculty do that would make you feel included? What would coming into the student VPSA's office, how would you feel included? Because we have ideas, but really they're the ones who can speak to, like, when a faculty does this makes me feel validated.
I love it. Brilliant.
Which is very counterintuitive to ivory tower education approach, but I think everyone's a knowledge holder. So how do you flip that script?
Yep. And the part 2, what if people do, faculty, staff, leaders that have you feel valued, belong, included, supported student success? And what do they do that have you not feel that way? Mm-hmm. So you can get stories on all sides, no names.
Great.